Corporate law firms that cut deals with the Trump administration, promising hundreds of millions of dollars in free legal services to the Trump administration, are now representing companies that are cutting deals that favor the government or selling themselves directly to him. I'm Rachel Cohen. I'm with Pragmatic Optimists over here on Legal AF at the Midas Touch Network. And you may recognize me because I was the first associate to leave a large corporate law firm over deal making with the Trump administration. So I've been paying pretty close attention to this, and it's extremely complicated and also underreported because at the end of the day, large businesses and large corporate law firms are not particularly sympathetic victims as the Trump administration ramps up attacks on migrants, on anyone who is non-white, on trans people. But we do need to talk about this as well because it is unbelievable crony capitalism at best and nationalization of the economy with occasionally deference to President Trump himself at worst. So back in March, a number of large corporate law firms promised hundreds of millions of dollars in free legal services to the Trump administration, including my own former employer, Skadden Arps, and a firm called Milbank. Now, these firms are representing companies who are chasing Trump administration approval over antitrust concerns or that are seeking bailouts. We're going to talk about the two examples of this that have landed on my radar recently, starting with the newest first, because I tuned in at the beginning of this week when it broke that my former employer, Skadden Arps, represented Intel, the company, as it sold a 10% stake in itself to the Trump administration. When I saw that, the headlines that broke made me wonder, wait, Skadden's representing the company against the Trump administration when they promised the Trump administration $100 million in free legal work? I am not an ethics expert, and I know that conflicts rules vary significantly when one of the parties being represented is the US government, which means that what you kind of typically think of in terms of a conflict of interest might not apply directly when one of the parties being represented is the government, because there are so many ongoing government representations and the government touches so many different things. But still, it felt a little bit questionable to me that a company would want to engage a large corporate law firm that has publicly shown deference and promised money or free legal services, money in the form of free legal services to the Trump administration. Why would you want that firm to represent you against him as you are trying to negotiate a sale that maximizes shareholder value for whatever kind of pricing of stock or other benefits you receive in that sale? I dug into it a little bit more and realized that the stock price that Intel sold all of its stock portion at was about $20 and some change, when that same stock closed at $24 and some change the day that they closed the sale. So we already have Intel selling at about an 83% discount to the Trump administration. That doesn't necessarily mean that anything is off or fishy. When you buy a large stake of a company, you're often not going to be paying exactly what the stock closed at, especially when it's structured as a bailout. I can't speak to just how common that is, but it certainly set alarm bells off for me. As I dug in a little bit more, I realized that 10% that was sold, the funds that Donald Trump used to pay the purchase price, were already promised to Intel in large part through grants offered to it by the Biden administration. The government already owed them this money. There's not only real, almost quid pro quo bribery. What did they do? Did they threaten to withhold the grants, as we've seen the Trump administration doing constantly? That kind of dynamic. There's also a real legal enforceability issue, because one of the basic rules of contract law is that you cannot create an enforceable contract where one party doesn't give anything up. To have an enforceable contract, a sale, a merger agreement, anything else, both parties have to give something up. And so if funding was already allocated to Intel, if they were already owed that money, the government's not giving anything up. And I'm sure that Skadden has some formalistic legal argument as to why they did, in fact, give something up and it wasn't all past consideration, which is what that kind of you have to give something up new requirement is referred to. But it's pretty weird. It's pretty fishy. And I sent it to a couple of friends and they flagged for me something that I had completely missed that happened back in June. When US Steel sold itself to Nippon Steel, a Japanese company, a merger that was being blocked for years because of antitrust concerns and also concerns about foreign influence in US industry. Ultimately, when US Steel's sale to Nippon was approved by the Trump administration, they offered him up something called a G-class share, which is like a golden level of share that a corporate law professor reviewed the new charter of US Steel and realized gave no powers to the US government broadly and instead gave those powers specifically to Donald Trump. I went and looked Milbank, representative of US Steel, in this merger deal, along with another firm called Wachtell that didn't make a deal with the Trump administration. But Milbank did. And I have a feeling that if we pay close attention to who is handling these egregiously mismatched deals at the upper echelons of corporate industry in the United States over and over again, we will find that they are being handled by law firms that cut deals with the Trump administration, that sold out not only their duty to their clients, to the legal system in the United States, but to every other person who lives here as well. They're really counting on these news cycles to pass. And you can see that it's possible because I follow this very, very closely. And I am just now connecting the dots about this US Steel merger that happened sale that happened in June. But if we dial in, I think we will see this pattern repeat over and over again. And I'm committed to dialing in, to sharing that with you here on Legal AF at the Midas Touch Network. You can follow along, like, subscribe. You can follow me on personal social media at Cohen.489. And we will keep you abreast of all of the crony capitalism, questionable legality, and quid pro quo, seemingly, that's happening within the Trump administration.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.